We envision a future where individuals are empowered to think critically and creatively, where citizens become agents of change by promoting self governance, co creation, and bottom up approaches. Welcome to our podcast. Welcome back to the Creation Podcast. Today I am joined by Desiree Driesenaar. I said your last name.
Yes, yes, that's how you normally pronounce it, but it's always a bit hard for English-speaking people.
Yeah,
They say Desiree Driesenaar or
oh
something,
yes.
but that's okay. It doesn't matter.
Luckily, I mean, I do speak Dutch as well, but it's just that everything runs in English, so
I
I
know, I know. I'm bilingual as well, so I lived a long time in England, so that's yeah, and I do a lot of international work, so
yes.
I'm used to my name being just D or Didi or whatever.
Okay, so my options.
Yeah.
Welcome and thank you for joining us. I invited you because I was so intrigued by the work that you do in abundanism. I think just the word abundanism is fantastic because um, what I see worldwide as a culture is a culture of lacking. So I really like this concept of abundanism. But please tell us a bit about yourself. Who are you, and how did you come to do this work of abundanism?
Yes. Well, I started out with a rather normal career in mobility, in even chemistry in the beginning of my career. I did economics and I did languages, cultures, because I'm really interested in cultures. And I I started out in a chemical company. And then I left because I thought, well, this is just not for me. I didn't like the toxicity of chemistry, of a lot of chemistry, and also the way people talk about it as if it's normal. So then I went to smaller companies and I went to Amsterdam to be part of a removals company. And that was really great. And then I did more things in the language spheres and I was in an advertising agency and I did a lot of communication work. I became a strategic communication manager. And my last job before I became a freelancer was as a international marketing manager in high tech, which is of course a lot about, it's not about blowing bubbles as marketing, it's really business to business. So it's more about getting the depth of, for instance, we were doing technology on vacuums and plasmas. Well, then you have to talk to a lot of scientists. And then I packaged it in ways that customers understand it, but also understand differences and what is good or not, or why, or things like that. So that's what I've been doing most of my life. And then in 2011, I don't know what happened, but one morning I woke up and I thought, I need freedom.
Okay.
I had always been in safe jobs and I thought I need to be a freelancer. Ooh, that's exciting, but also scary. So I had a job for 4 days a week. So I took my extra day to start studying because the other word that came in that morning was sustainability. And I thought, I don't know anything about solar panels.
Yeah.
I was not even interested in windmills. So very soon I came across the holistic visions. So that's cradle to cradle, circular economy, The natural steppe is really big in Sweden and Canada, and also Eindhoven, where I'm close.
Mhm.
And well, there is a lot of things happening. And then in 2012, I saw a lecture of Günter Pauli,
Mhm.
and he has a think tank, Zero Emissions Research Initiatives, and it's worldwide. He has been busy with it since the 1970s. And it's really built on nature solutions. So, how does nature do things, and what don't we use yet for good solutions?
That is,
And I saw this lecture and I thought, well, this is it. This is it, it touched something.
yeah,
So 1 year later, I went to the summer school in Hungary, Blue Economy Summer School, because this movement is called Blue Economy.
blue collar.
And it's all about systemic designs. So you look at an environment and you use that environment to design the scope, the economic scope, the society scope, and the solutions.
Right.
And yeah, we do in the world, of course, a lot of economies of scale. So we make huge flows, and then we have huge problems of these huge flows, and then we try to divide them in small things, and it all goes wrong. And economies of scope works from the ground up. So local, it's like island economies, call it island economies. It's not only about islands, but you take a scope. It can be an industrial estate, it can be a harbor,
Mhm.
it can be whatever. And then you use the environment and what is all there you can use. It's a lot of beta sciences, but then you use it to create the plus in the system. That's also why I call it, we go from the Anthropocene, where it's just human thinking,
Mhm.
to the plus of the system, the sin, which is in Greek, is sin is plus, and tropos is the way, the manner how we do it. And then we go for the plus in the system, so we can have growing economies, although nobody believes me at this moment, I think, by just going the other way around. And these people have been busy with it for since the 1970s, since we went to the moon, I think. I think there was a lot of consciousness coming when the astronauts came back from the moon and they saw this blue planet and they were touched in their hearts and they thought, okay, let's do something. A lot of the astronauts became um, environmentalists, and we learned to work with closed systems, which is of course a ship, for instance, or a rocket,
Mhm.
a spaceship, and we learned to work with open systems. And since the 1970s, there's also permaculture in
Yeah.
the world, and it has a lot of design principles. So after Blue Economy, I started studying further. I worked a lot with Günther on several economies. I didn't do Bonaire, but it was my first example of how it can be done, and I was so inspired. And then I went to the Spanish island of El Hierro where they did it, and we did it in Austria, and we did it in Rotterdam, and we did it in, well, I do it myself because I have my work in Limburg. So that's near the German border. So we do a lot of projects on healthy buildings and on healthy soils and connections with water, things like that. And harbor, we have a River Maas. So we do harbor redesigns. And then you can see that where the problems are, you can also see where solutions are.
Yeah.
And they're not always easy because people don't think like this. And that's what I try to change. There are a lot of examples, but also people think very superficially about them. So then you can make a nice design. But then you get other problems, of course, in that design. And then you have to solve those also with nature principles. Apart from blue economy, there's another huge movement, which is biomimicry by Janine Benyus.
Mhm.
I must say, all these people from the first times, they know each other. So Günter Pauli, Janine Benyus, the natural steppers from Carl Henrik Robert in Sweden, they know each other. There was an architect in Sweden, Anders Nyquist. He died in the meantime, but I loved working with him. It is Bernard Littard, who's on macroeconomy. He also died in the meantime, but we tried to make markets together with the new, because now with digital design, you can do so much more. And that is very interesting because you can do 3D design that gives a lot of insights. And also, like with money, you can have a lot of things like underneath the currencies, you can go with digital currencies and you can go with other ways to design like the flows. And that's what I do now in all kinds of ways because I am still economy. So
Yeah.
that's macro and business economy. And also, I am this environmentalist. But the thing is, an environmentalist is all about health. So for me, it's mostly toxicity that I want to get out of the world.
Yeah.
I'm not, of course, I do things on CO2 as well, but CO2 and O2, and O2 is also very destructive. So there's lots of things to consider there. So, but yes, I do things on seaweeds because they get a lot of CO2 out of the air, more than land forestation. And I studied also permaculture because that's where it starts with the communities. So now I go more to, yeah, like at this moment this week, I spoke to Africa, to Kenya. And then we, yeah, are looking for coastal solutions with tourism, with, yeah, for the communities, with progress, but also with health. Yeah.
You said a lot of interesting things.
I know, I
I
know.
was just
It's so
writing
much.
down.
Yeah.
I was like, where do I start going in? But there's
Go
something
for Bonaire. Why not talk Bonaire?
I do want to talk about that, but before I talk about that, there's something that you mentioned a couple of minutes ago that stuck with me is that people don't believe you that this can be done. What are the criticisms that you are seeing in terms of this blue economy and more, I call it harmonious growth with the
Yeah, harmonious growth is, I think, the good word. You need to have balances and you need to have, yeah. What we do to grow the economy is we go for ecological intensification. And a lot of the environmentalists don't like the word because they think, oh yeah, and then they go intensify again.
right.
Well, but we can do it. We can use the empty space in systems and then redesign. And you can, it's a very easy sum to come to zero, which is, for instance, if a company emits CO2,
Mhm.
then you put a closed greenhouse for spirulina growth next to it, and then it uses the CO2. So it is about design of the area.
Mm,
And then you can have economic growth because the company that emits CO2 makes sure that he is self-sufficient for everything. And that's the principle we always use, self-sufficiency. Everybody who's a consumer or user will always also be a producer. So we can produce much more
right.
in all kinds of settings. And then we can also use this to create multiple values because spirulina is a wonderful food and we need food in the world. And it's also a user of CO2.
Right.
So why not go for closed greenhouses that really grow good food with, yeah. So those things can be done in more the industrial settings.
Mhm.
But of course, in the rural settings, there is a lot of work now done just with soil and water, and that is permaculture. And for instance, we have in the Limburg area, we have an environmental and social project for generational buildings, off-grid buildings. So they will not use the big system, say they're out of the system for sewage,
Mhm.
for water, for for energy. So, and then we combine it with food forestry,
Right. Mhm.
because food forestry is really a very good way of having an abundance of food, because you use 7 layers and all the species work together. So you have herbs there, you have nuts there, you have tree growth, you have bushes, and everything is edible. That's why I talk about edible cities. If we have not enough food, why do I go to Athens and see all these orange trees in Athens and citrus trees and nobody harvests?
Yeah.
And then I ask the people, why don't you harvest? And then they say, well, they're not edible.
Oh.
And I say, why? They say, well, they just chose a species that is just for the color. It's because it looks nice. And I
Yeah.
think, how?
Yes, it makes
So
sense.
that is where the abundance is in also the global goals. Do we need food? Add food. And then maybe have, like, if you need evaporation to have a city that cools the planet, it can be done. You can do it with colors, like black absorbs light and heat, and white reflects light and heat. So with colors, you can cool the planet with these kind of mechanisms.
Yes, that's interesting.
You can also cool with evaporation, which is done by plants. So if you have a lot of the regeneration people, they are now really big in architecture and everything.
Yeah.
And then we have plant facades, because that's unused space.
I
You
know.
have unused roofs, you have unused facades of buildings, you have unused that's space in a system, you know?
Yes.
And you can make either free goods with them, and I'm a lot about making things free for free. So I always replace something with nothing. That's another thing I want to talk about next, maybe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Please go ahead. So how do
Um,
you face something with
yeah. Yeah. In economies, the entrepreneurs, they create the value in the system, the money in the system, and they create jobs. So I love entrepreneurs. They create jobs. But if you do not create jobs that fit an environment, the island or the working, like in Limburg, we have a lot of, they call it verdozing.
what?
So a lot, verdozing of Limburg is a real term. And that means that we have a lot of boxes, a lot of distribution centers, they pop up.
Yeah.
Big, bigger, biggest.
Yes.
People hate them.
I too hate them, yes.
And those are entrepreneurs, and the governments, the local governments, sell their land to these entrepreneurs, and they say, yeah, because we create jobs.
Yeah.
And then I say, but who has these jobs? Because my daughter, she works in one of these distribution centers, and my son-in-law does in another one.
Mhm.
And they have jobs, yes, but they are the only Limburg person and even the only Dutch person in their team.
Yes.
So they work with Spanish people and Bulgarian people and Polish people.
Yes, I've had this
And
experience.
that's good. It still creates jobs.
Yeah.
But for the area, it creates a lot of pressure on the public systems.
Yeah.
We have lack of houses in Holland, you know it. I cannot even afford a house in Holland. So I live most of the time in Greece, where because I work international, I can do that. But at this moment, I cannot afford a house in Holland because it's too expensive. So accumulation is the biggest problem in the system because the biggest buildings,
Mm.
they are polluting the view for people. They are polluting tourism because people hate it.
Yeah.
They want to have nice mass and nice nature and nice, and then they see this and they think, so
Yes.
it's polluting. It is causing drought in the area because it's concrete and asphalt
Yes.
and there's no plants there to evaporate. It's causing energy problems because they do not have their own solar panels or their own windmills to create their own energy.
Which I don't understand. Sorry to interrupt you there. I never understood having such a big building with most of them having a flat roof and not having your own like energy production.
Yeah. But it has to do with the way that we structured things in the globalized, industrialized world. So it is a transition we're in now.
Yes.
And now we are trying to find the good scale for everything, I think. So, but that also means that in our country, Holland, Alliander, the one who does the networks,
Yes.
they have to think different. And then the governments will have to say in their law, okay, what you use, you produce. If you need water, you produce water. If you need energy, you produce energy.
Yeah.
If you need, well, whatever, and you produce it. If you need food, well, produce your own food.
Yes.
So, and that you can say to an area, but you can also say it to a company. And you can also say it to a conglomerate of companies. So, and then the scale is important because for a company, sometimes it's not good to go off grid,
Yes.
but they can go in an industrial estate, have a local area. And now we have technology. So like on El Hierro, the little island that belongs to Spain, they do real-time monitoring of demand and of supply and demand of energy.
Mhm.
They have different sources to do it because that's what nature would do it as well. So I design for resilience. So because if one falls out, because there's, for instance, no wind, they have windmills and they have two basins with height. And they have microbial installations with biomass.
Oh.
So they have different, and they have things like solar roads.
Mhm.
So you have different ways to produce energy. And then if one falls out, like if there is a lot of wind, and there is excess wind, they pump the water up from the lower basin to the higher basin. And then when there's no wind, they say, okay, now we go for gravity, because we make sure it's a water hydro technique to have from the higher basin to the lower basin have the and then they have energy from that. So you will never have a no energy situation.
Mm, I like this. Yeah, but maybe this is a good moment that we can go over to Bonaire. Like, how do we
Yes.
these things working for Bonaire? Like, I like the idea that you were saying before about the designing. Um, so I'm going back and I'm gonna remodel parts of my childhood home to make this hub for creation. And we're gonna be doing things like rapid prototyping and just testing things out. And then this is one of the design ideas I want to work with. So I started thinking about, okay, the remodeling itself, I want to already be using these principles. And I looked, for example, for managing heat, I was looking at building maybe a terracotta wall because I saw this helps. And I was thinking also about this concept of evaporation. So if I have plants at the bottom and I let water fall down, which helps cool, but then it also waters the plants at the same time. So this was one of the ideas I was having for Bonaire. But I also like this idea that you're talking about now about the electricity, because in recent years we've seen them put windmills, and it is my understanding that they are now working on a solar park as well. But I mean, roads that can get you electricity on an island with so much sun as Bonaire would be
Yeah. Well,
fantastic.
that's what we do in biomimicry and also in blue economy is we replace something with nothing. Like in Holland, they say, okay, we want loading poles because some company comes in and says, well, you need electric loading poles. And then I say the public money is already going to roads.
Mhm.
Roads should clean water, should evaporate it, should um, uh, because it should clean water, infiltrate water, because you do not want, like in malaria areas, you do not want still water too much in cities because you have mosquitoes then.
Yeah.
So above water, above ground, water should be flowing. And below ground, it is more still water. So things like that we think about in the designs of where you are. And with Bonaire, the really funny thing is that that's also why I loved having this talk, because 10 years ago when I started in Hungary, I already had this example of Bonaire because Günther has been there, and Günther Pauli and the team of Zeri has been on Bonaire, and they have had lots of blue tables. It was a project where the people could say, okay, what do we want to be as an island? And that's also how it started in El Hierro. And then they said, well, it's really a touristic island. We want to be beautiful. We want to be have people come because it's beautiful. And we want to be natural. We want to let nature do the work. So we want to have a lot of natural growth, and we want to be resilient for climate change because that's important in Bonaire.
Yes.
And then there was a huge, there were a lot of ideas there, and they were also calculated through by the by some scientists and everything how to do it. And in the first years where I lectured on blue economy, I used Bonaire as an example all the time. But I know that a lot of things have not been done because I talked to Günther later.
Yes.
I think it was, I don't know, 7 years later or something. And I said, well, how much is done on Bonaire? And he said, well, there's not really that they see the whole vision of the whole island. So it's small things that some entrepreneurs have done. And one thing that they have done is apparently Van der Valk a restaurant or hotel has done a lot of work on the replanting of the corals, because that's also, of course, in Bonaire a thing, the corals and the diving and everything. So yes, but the other things that came out of the blue tables was, for instance, the mangroves and the mangrove reforestation. And in the meantime, I've seen a lot of this work done in Indonesia, for instance, how you can do it. And there they combine it with ecological fish farming, so the fishermen have jobs as well. But of course, after 10 years, technology has gone further as well. So Günther has a big ship now where you can also see how you can fish with bubble nets, like the whales do it, and then you don't have any bycatch. So it's very sustainable fishing. And like in Aliedo, the cooperatives of fishermen have said, okay, we will only fish with lines, and then we have very sustainable tuna. They also made a very, one part of the island is a reserve. No divers can go there. No, you do not, and they replenish the sea like that. So they have one part of the area is really for fish to become really old.
Yes.
Because if you, now we say, okay, we can fish, but if they're too small, you have to throw them back.
Yeah.
But if a fish is big like this, it will make, maybe it will lay, I don't know, 1,000 eggs. And if a fish can grow this big, it lays 1,000,000 or 1,000,000,000 eggs. And if you make shelters for that, for the growth of the fish, then you replenish the sea. And then, of course, you have to combine it with routes of the ships to just one part of the island to not destruct the rest. So at this moment, the mangrove thing was also about creating jobs for people, because they came to the conclusion on Bonaire there's a lot of goats.
Yes.
And there's wild goats, and they really destroy everything.
Donkeys as well. And there are donkeys as well roaming. Yeah.
Okay, so they're also but maybe I'm not sure, because there's a lot of knowledge now about holistic grazing, and of course, if you overgraze, then you will destroy everything, and you will not have any plants anymore. So you will have to domesticize the animals at least a little.
Yes.
So what they said is, okay, the goats, let's let abundance do the work. So they said, instead of killing the goats, because some scientists came with a plan to say, okay, how much carrying capacity has the island? And then we kill the rest of the goats.
Right.
Well, that's reductionist and destructive thinking. So what we said, no, let abundance do the work. We wanted to domesticize the goats, put fences around them, so they don't destruct more than they really can. You can have electronic fences even, you can chip them and they will not go over the fence. You do not even have to have physical barriers. Like a dog in Holland, you have it as well, where you see in the rural areas, you can see a barking dog and you don't see a fence, but he doesn't go
Yeah.
because he is chipped and so that could be done as well.
Mm.
But the goats, domesticize them. And then we wanted to I'm not sure, I really want to hear from you later when you're there, how much of this has become a reality.
Okay. I'll let you know.
They wanted to bring new genes, so other goats in, because on an island you have gene deterioration. That's clear. If you have goats and they mate with each other for long, then they will not give as much milk as when you bring in new genes in the whole pool. So we brought more goats to the island instead of less.
Mm-hmm.
Then you could have a whole flourishing economy on the combination of mangroves and goats and milk. And you would have a real agricultural economy, but the mangroves, the tops of the mangroves are very edible and very nutritious for the goats. They just have to get used to the taste, apparently, because the mangroves are a bit salty.
Right.
But like in Indonesia, I saw they made kerupuk, which is normally made from shrimps.
Yes.
They made it out of mangroves. You have vegan kerupuk there.
Oh.
So those kind of ideas. And then the goats, of course, can be well, in Holland, you have all ideas about milk. You know it. You can have cheeses, you can have French cheeses, Dutch cheeses, whatever. Goat's cheeses are very, very healthy, more healthy than the cow cheese, because the cow has 4 stomachs. So the milk is less digestible for humans than goat's cheese. So those stories can make the branding for the whole region, for the whole, everything you do is about health. And then you can have ice cream, and you can have this with the coral restoration. In Limburg, I met a young guy. He was in TEDx with me. I was a TEDx coach in one point.
Yes.
And he was 13 and he was really so inspired, and he went to Bonaire all the time to replant the corals. And that's also where Günther said, well, bring Dutch young people to maybe get their diving licenses on Bonaire, because you are a Dutch municipality.
Yes.
And I really want us together to make this story about Bonaire being very important in Holland and being an example for Holland to make to not be the poor cousin that needs to be rescued. No, 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 no. You are the wise ones. You are the island economy that can teach us everything. That's what I want.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful vision. I wanted to ask about the goats, because you mentioned them having to get used to the salt, and then I remember there are some goats that like salt.
That's the thinking, you know. Yeah. The scientists came with another solution. They said, okay, if you domesticize them, then you can bottle feed them at first, make them get used to the taste, and then when they grow up, they like it.
Yes.
Because what you want to do, the principle behind it, is you want to give the goats, if you want to have abundance of goats and abundance of economy of goats on it,
Yes.
then of course you will have farmers making the flavors like cactus flavor and pineapple and every flavor you can think of. You make for the ice creams. Ice cream makes the most money. That has the biggest
Margin.
margin in it. But of course, the yogurts are very healthy as well, and the cheeses. But the ice creams can feed into the tourism.
Yes.
So that's why Günther had the idea that when we would have a visit from our king and queen on the island, they would get Bonaire blue economy ice cream to taste, to give this promotion and marketing idea and let the principles land.
Yes.
But the principle, of course, is about find a food for the goats that can be abundant on the island naturally, and that is not food for humans.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that's also like in that's maybe a bit of a difference with the circular economy. Like in Blue City, they do a wonderful blue economy in Rotterdam. They have about 200 entrepreneurs who think like this. But some of them make vegan leather, for instance, out of pineapple.
Yes.
And then we think pineapple is too valuable as a product.
Yes.
So don't go there, but make vegan leather out of mangroves. Why not?
Yeah.
The mangrove plant also in Blue Economy, we were still planting mangroves. What I've seen in Indonesia, and that was also a Dutch team, so it's available for you on Bonaire, was Building with Nature and Wetlands International.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm.
And they built bamboo walls in the sea to make new land because the waves bring it over the walls. They trap the sediments. And then apparently in mangrove areas, there are so many dormant seeds in the soil, in the sediments, that they grow automatically and they grow with full biodiversity.
Wow.
So then it needs not planting. That's again a replace something with nothing in the system, make it cheaper, make it easier for local people. And then also make the mangroves grow again. And of course, the mangroves are our good defense against the sea level change and also for getting extra land. So that's the abundance of land you get. In this whole project are also big companies, so they can also give like technological information. There are dredgers in there like Van Oort and Boscalis. So they have separate teams for this kind of thinking. So you have to find, because you cannot go to any company and say they already think like this, because they don't. But you can educate people with abundance, because it is the abundance of nature that does it. But then you have to be smart to make sure your economy is abundant too. And I want to share one thing about that, about public money and private money, because the private money is mostly the investments in health and in roads and in everything. And if you do replace something with nothing, then it is less costly. Because you can imagine that a solar road does two things, or a cleaning road does two things. You do it in one process. And you just say as a government, okay, Who gives me the cleaning road? Because the knowledge is done. They have sponge cities in China where they work with all this water balancing stuff, and they are fed with technology from Delft University. So together we can find all these things if you would want to have projects in Bonaire and yeah, and maybe also get some funding, because that's why at this moment I work, well, mostly my work is on funding,
And
because
yeah, so we can have all kinds of ideas, but if
yeah, that's the thing. Yeah. So we're working now on funding for algae platforms, because seaweeds are absorbing 20 times more carbon out of the air than land forestation. So we're working on autonomous floating seaweed platforms, but also on ships. Ships can clean water. Why not? It's the idea, but you have to have the idea first before you start making it happen. And then we have the engineering knowledge by now to do it. Come on. It's not like, so that's why it's so good that biomimicry is now really one of the biggest innovation methods worldwide. And we're finding it out all together with technology, with science, with communities. Yeah. And then you have to realize that one thing will, also, it is what you say, it's a balance. On El Hierro, they had to decide, it's a story of an island, and they started already in the last century. It's an old example. And they, for instance, also wanted only ecotourism,
yes,
because mass tourism wrecks the place. So they want divers, and they want sporty people, and they want nature people. So they made sure that you can only fly there with an extra stop. And that means the mass goes to Tenerife or whatever. And then El Hierro is really the island for specialized people. And a lot of the Tenerife people come there for holidays. So other Spanish people come there for holidays.
we had this before, and in my it was in my youth. I'm still young, but when I was younger still, and growing up on the island, there was this kind of tourism, predominantly people that would come and stay sometimes for months, and then they would be, some people had like part-time homes in Bonaire, and then they would go back to, I remember this couple from the UK, because I was working in a dive shop, and they would spend 6 months in the UK because they had to, and then came back to Bonaire.
Yeah,
Um, but we had a lot more of these kind of tourists before, and then at a certain point, a lot more cruise ships started coming, and with so much frequency that these kind of tourists didn't really like being there anymore, because it's got too busy with a lot of tourist bus and these things. And I thought that is really a shame that
yeah, yeah.
went back. So that is one of the things that I'm curious. Can that be retracted? Can we no longer be on?
Yeah. Well, one thing is, but then you have to talk to the government and say, well, they're wrecking our seas for the divers, and divers is what we need. So then you could say, make it a bottleneck, just maybe one or two harbors that can have the cruise ships, and they are timed. So then you can, you will not have everywhere harbors to have the cruise ships. No, 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 no. We want to have the corals. We want to be untouched. You make a bottleneck to the island, And then you can have only one cruise ship at a time on one part of the island. And then the rest of the island, it's like a bit what Ibiza is doing. The southern part is really touristic and whatever. It's what Bali is doing. The southern part is really touristic and whatever. And people who like that and people who want to just party and whatever. The rest is really for this kind of things. Like if I go to Bali, there's Green School Bali there, and they're in Ubud, which is more in the center. And yes, they do these beautiful bamboo buildings, and bamboo is an abundantly available material in so much difference and so much that you can have beautiful buildings that are earthquake resistant and you can do so many things with these kind of ways. And then you can also solve the electricity issues very modern, because the bamboo people together with Siri have done tests in Italy. And I guess because they are in Japan at this moment and doing a lot in China and Japan, they make an earthquake resistant building. And when it has a little bit of tiny bit of movement, like bamboo has, then you can have piezoelectronics off grid. And you can have the pressure of the roof, which is gravity, pressure difference, to make energy for the whole building. Well, things like this are still very unknown. And because the whole grids, the energy grids are always big, and then they don't think about off grids. But you can be an island of so much innovation of all these things, because Günther was with you earlier than with us, because he is Belgian, he is Flemish, Blue Economy is Flemish. It is the Desiree organization is in Japan, so it's really European Japanese thinking. And it is these blue tables have been done in Bonaire much earlier than the 2012 that the book was. I was at the launch of the book. That's what I first heard about it. And it was in 2012 because it was translated in Dutch back then.
Yes.
And I don't know, but in these 10 years, we seem to just go on as if these things didn't emerge. But we, as people like you and me, and inspire as many other people in the world with the regenerative movement as well, because regeneration is a very big thing now. And biomimicry is a very big thing now. And it is, yes, it is a bit of better tech, and it is a bit of science, but you can think about it. And it's really inspiring a lot of technical people as well on your island.
I like it. I first heard of the blue economy when I was an intern for the Ecodar Pukkel. They were interviewed because they considered their bubble like a blue economy, and they have a food garden as well. It's just really nice, and really nice to see them going further also in what they do. They also use the bio mimicry for the designs, and I was also inspired by them, and thus I am where I am now. I had a final question for us. Maybe we'll talk another.
Yes.
We can go on forever about this. But My final question is concerning traveling, because that's one of the things. Like, I did a climate coach training in June, and that was one of the heavy things, like traveling, especially flying. And I like traveling, but of course I don't want to be causing this damage to the environment. Is there a way that we can do this in
Yes. Well, I still think freedom is my big word. So I don't want to tell people what to do or what not to do. I just want to enlighten them on all the possibilities. The earth, it is science now in Gaia theory that the earth is a self-regulating organism. So we are nature, and that means that we emit CO2. You can say, well, kill the people because then we don't have CO2 anymore. But we also breathe a lot of O2. And O2 is very good for us, which is the oxygen, but it's also a very destructive material because you can see it for fire, for instance. You need, if you have oxygen, you have bigger fire. And if you have no oxygen, then the fire extinguishes.
Yes.
Well, everything has two sides. And that's what I learned in the past 10 years after I started studying. Everything has more sides. And the planet will really balance everything. That doesn't mean that we should not, for instance, that's why I work on toxicity, because our chemistry is way too toxic and it should be green chemistry. From the plains, I must say, first of all, it gives a lot of peace in the world when we see how other people live. So that is really, it gives a lot of ideas for our own environment when we come back. That's why I want places to be very diverse and inspiring environments for others. If you travel, it's how I do it personally, because I, of course, travel as well, as you heard from my stories. If I can go overland, I go overland. So I use boats, or I use a train or a car. But a boat is very polluting as well,
Yes.
because we have horrible energy sources. The moment I can work on shipyards and tell them to use water and make hydrogen out of it on the boat. So that is also what Günther is doing. He made now a prototype boat with all kinds of ways, like you can have hydrogen without a lot of, without electrolyzers, without compressors, because hydrogen is the biggest problem, that it uses a lot of energy because it's just storage of energy. It's not a production of energy. Well, that's the kind of technologies we need then on a boat to get the whole boating industry excited. So I do a lot of my work online. And then you can say, well, even online uses a lot of energy. And it's true. At this moment, we're still in deep transition. But I work again with the biomimicry professor of math who has the super formula. And the super formula is a new kind of dynamic math. That is the unifying formula that also engineering has been waiting for all this time, that The physicists have been dreaming about it, and the astrophysicists. Well, this is made by an astrophysicist and a mathematician and a botanist. They understand ecology and how it works on the planet. So it is one formula, but with that one formula, you can even make VR very realistically with just KBs instead of GBs. That means less transfer over systems. That means a data center of this size instead of this size.
Yes, that is.
See, so we're in transition. I'm just trying to get this message across that abundance is not just a nice word for everybody, because I say abundance for all. That means I want all these island economies and all the global south to understand what is happening, because you still have also the space and the need. What I've been struggling with the past 10 years is I've been in environments where we don't need to do any less. We don't need to do anything. There's just no urgency. Apart from some governments saying we should, and nobody wants it. Mm-hmm. But if you have space, it's like in a war. The Second World War is for me still very realistic. I'm older than you, and my parents were really in this war. So it is close to me. My father had big war traumas, and my mother really lived through the war. She was 10 when it ended, and he was 17. So they were not really young anymore. They understood what was happening. After the war, Germany was really bombarded a lot. Holland was bombarded a lot. We got space. We got a lot of problems. We got a lot of destruction. England was one of the rescuers, did not get a lot of destruction. Where did the really big growth and the really, because the money goes to where the destruction is, then you can make big leaps in like technology. And I think that all the climate money that is coming to climate prone areas like islands and everything else, we have in Amsterdam, we have this, he was the minister of Richard Visser. He was the minister of human health, of healthcare in Aruba. And he then now is one of the leading forces behind tropical island healthcare. And he has, it's called Earth Nurse and Earth Medics, because we have to use everything on these islands. You have often less access to healthcare, so we need AI to really do things like easy and faster really recognition of what it is. But then we also have to include like India principles, which is Ayurveda. India has a minister of Ayurveda.
Ayurveda?
Oh. Yes. And that is called in Holland. I had cancer last year, and I talked a lot to my oncologist, and I know all this nature stuff. And I said to him, well, how do I make sure that my chemo is not wrecking other people because I pee it out? He says, I don't know. I said, well, you should. You're the seller of this chemo. You're the seller of antibiotics. You're the seller of hormone pills for women, anti-conception, and all these hormones come into the environment through the rivers. It's you should have either halophyte filters or you should have like dry toilets to not have this, and do it with microbes, because microbes can do so much. So those are the things I kind of work on. And I must say my projects mostly find me. So you found me. If you need me, just call me. If you get funding, or if we can do funding together from maybe the Dutch government, why not? I will write a one-pager and you go for the funding for Bonaire with a team on Bonaire. And then, yeah, if you need me to be part of the team, Günther doesn't have the time, but I can be part of teams. But of course, funded teams, then we can do great things together.
Really
And
exciting.
talk to governments. I love working with the young people. You have to find it out in the new eras. There will be a time when all this work otherwise stays hidden.
Yeah. Yeah, and I am fighting against that. As that was the point also for starting this podcast. I looked around my network and I said, I have such a fantastic network. People are doing things with regeneration or with abundantism like you are doing, and no one knows that this is going on. And I
Yeah,
think so much panic around the climate, and that people are indeed talking as if just wipe us off the planet and just have the planet be itself. I said, but that's very destructive thinking, and that gives you uh kind of an easy cop out. Well, I'm just not gonna change and I'm gonna keep living the way I am now and then die. And then since I died, then the planet will, it's not my issue.
yeah, yeah.
I don't want to be a part of this type of thinking.
No. The thing is that the travel thing, I want to say a few more words about it, because you mentioned the English people having, at this moment, we do a project in Greece to get tourists to the area, nice tourists, and not too big. Well, if you do things like that, I now just made a very simple Facebook page for it. I make target groups. And because I want Greeks to have jobs and not tourists take over or northern people take over, I will not allow people to post a lot of things about buying houses and then leaving them empty half of the year. That's only driving up prices. I'm not talking about because the Greeks want to sell it to us. That's the thing. The problem is with the Greeks and the Dutch in this case, or the Northern European ones in this case, because we want to sell it right, nice and cheap, and we want to buy it there and be there. And the Greeks want to sell it for the best price, which is to outsiders. But then the outsiders leave it empty.
Mhm.
So what we need to be doing is fill up already existing houses, and then mainly off season.
Yeah.
So if you go for touristic things like that, go for instance for digital nomads. There are a lot of people in these climate worlds, like where I live, I work, and they love things like this and be on nice places and do their digital work like this. You can also have people like in the Greek part, we found out. Sometimes you find out things when you just start. So we found out that a lot of people are interested to come there for a few months to find their ancestors, their Greek ancestors. So that is very nice target group, because then we can fill it up with people from abroad who are interested in Greek culture, in Greek, because I do the leadership by always saying, listen to the Greeks. They are the ones in charge. Not me, not other Northern Europeans. We can think, we can have ideas, but it's their land, it's their village. And then the Greeks, because I explain things as well, I will now go there again from October to February. Long time. I will travel overland. And yes, there are people like older people, like pensioners. They would like to overwinter. Well, make Bonaire a nice overwinter place and make sure that the Bonaire people own the buildings that they rent out to the pensioners from Holland. So that is an economic system you make work. In Indonesia, they have done it from the government out because they say, as a foreigner, you can never own anything in our country. So if, for instance, we want to have a house there to stay, we have a kind of a bonus daughter there that we really would love to have, like a life and things like that. We would buy it if we would have the money. We would buy it together with her in her name. She will be in our testaments the one to really get it, to really, she's much younger. She's, so, and then we will also, if we are not there, it is an income source for her and her family, her community, her whatever she wants to spend it on. Yes? So, or she can go live there. It can be both sides. So those are the kind of the in-between solutions that Mike and I, my husband and I, have found, thinking about all these things. But we understand that everything has a downside, but we are called to these places and we cannot not be there. So also, if you ever want us on Bonaire, we would love to stay longer, be your guest with your community, and then bring stuff to the island and really do some in-depth thinking about things and helping you design things so that you are there then empowered to give it speed with a bigger community on the island.
I would love that, actually.
Yeah? So that is how we do it. And yes, that is how you can do it as well. We can all book these Corendon holidays and go 1 week to whatever, but that's not what, that's why regenerative travel is a good term. Yes, we travel, but it is regenerative travel because without these ideas, you would not get the speed on the island to get it going. You can also use us then to talk to governments, to talk to companies, to talk to whoever you want us to talk to.
That is great. I'll definitely stay in contact with you about
Yeah.
it. So now I'm just gonna, for this period of about 3 months, I'm working on the crowdfunding campaign. And then I'll move. And once I'm there and a bit settled, I'll definitely contact you about that.
Yeah. Wonderful.
Thank you very much for joining me. It was a pleasure listening to you talk. I'm inspired. I have taken a lot of notes.
I know it's always too much when I talk because I try to put 10 years of study into 1 hour and people get overwhelmed. People get confused sometimes. But I try to give it words, what is possible, so that they are inspired to ask questions of all these movements that are already there. And they will grow. They grow in the world.
Yes, I'm excited to continue. We can have another episode where we continue and going deeper in these topics. Yeah, again, thank you for joining and
thank you. for asking me.
My pleasure. Thank you for listening. Until next time on the Creation Podcast.
Okay, bye bye.